All right, welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Grant Coleman, my buddy who I met originally through the UU Church. And we've been friends in other projects since then, I think. Kind of try to have little film things go on a couple times. And one project's Pancakes, right?
Yeah.
He's in Pancakes that Jeff Madzai directed that's coming out soon. And
definitely excited for that, actually. Is that supposed to happen sometime real soon? Or?
I'm hoping that, I think probably March, April, Jeff's going to have the big debut. I think the film's probably done or close to being done. He's just waiting for nice weather to do the premiere and everything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I give Jeff credit and all the actors in that film because that was our first feature film by independent films, which I really didn't have much to do with. So I can't take credit for any of it. But, man, I'm proud of everybody, including Jeff especially. He worked on that thing. It's probably been about a year, February, that he started working on it, I want to say. And I asked him one time, I said, so how much time have you put in this film? Because I work on it a little bit every single day.
Yeah, I've heard you say that on some of the other podcasts. That
you're the guy that listens to the podcast.
I've listened to most of them.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Actually, the last one you did with Lindsay Schooler, that was a fan. It was really great to hear that.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah,
man.
she's great.
I'll be referencing her probably forever now because that was really great conversation for me personally, and just like what a unique spirit.
Yeah, her and I have met like several times in passing and in similar, like interests and types of things like that. But we had one time where we sat down and had a long conversation. We were like fast friends. It was like immediately. Yeah, I just connected with her. She's a great person, and she's got a really great thing going over there too.
She does, and it just kind of happened organically. Yeah. Which we weren't sure. We were just like been talking back and forth and like, we should do a podcast because you've always been a big supporter of the podcast and even had talked about maybe doing a podcast of your own at one point. So I thought, I got to have you on. And we're like, well, what are we going to talk about? But just since I got here, because I've probably been here for an hour, that we've been talking about starting businesses because you're starting a business and actually you already have one.
Right, yeah.
Is there a name for the kettle corn business?
Wheeling Feeling Kettle Corn, yeah.
Nice. And you guys do pretty well, right?
We do really well when we're working, but it's a pretty temporary gig because it's mostly we do festivals. When we first got started, we were open every Friday in Center Market, but life kind of got busy in our full-time jobs. My wife and I both have a full-time job, and that kind of got in the way also. But when we were there every Friday, we did really well there, and we've often said that we could actually probably both quit our jobs and do nothing but kettle corn full time and actually probably make more money.
Right.
We've never actually done it, obviously. So, but yeah, it does really well at the events that we go to. We've got a nice little following. Last year we did a thing in New Martinsville, actually, the Back Home Appalachian. I don't want to say it wrong, but it's the Back Home Appalachian Arts and Music Festival. I believe is what it's called. And it was their first year doing that festival, and we have all of a sudden a huge crowd in New Martinsville now, so that's great. We're hoping to do that one again here soon, but we do as many of the festivals at Heritage Port as we can, the ones that we see are profitable and worth doing. So, but yeah, we do great when we set up, and it's a fun, great way to make money for sure, and we take a lot of pride in the product that we put out. And
yeah, you guys always have a line. I know when I saw you, I think at Arts Fest, we're talking, and you're just making batch after batch after batch. You're dumping it into the tub. Devin's bagging it up, and people are buying it as quick as you guys could make it.
And that actually, the Arts Fest is a great festival for us, but there are festivals where just Devin and I could not operate the business by ourselves too. Probably the best festival for us each year. Originally, it started off as the Wing Fest in Center Market, and then it became Market Eats, I believe is what it was called last year.
Yeah,
Center Market Eats Festival. It was Market Street Festival with an Eat in there. Yeah, that's right. That festival is by far it's a rough day for us.
I bet.
It's nonstop. My brother and my sister-in-law will usually help us out with that, and my brother and I, it's just nonstop cranking on that machine. And it's not easy. It's actually pretty. The machine cooks at about 500 degrees, so you've got the heat factor in there for sure. Then
molten sugar.
Then you've got oil and molten sugar flying up in your face the whole time. You got to wear protective gear to make sure you're not burning yourself. And it's just you have to crank the machine as hard as you can and quickly as you can so that the corn doesn't stick to the machine and burn.
Yeah.
So it becomes hard work. And my brother and I actually outworked our propane tank several times. So
did you really?
We froze the propane tank solid at that festival almost every year. And I'm saying like half of a propane tank frozen into a block of ice.
Because it's gone out too quick, it freezes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
So you have to have extra tanks on hand to switch out. I mean, you do anyway because you have to have backup tanks to make sure you can switch it out. But So yeah, the machine cooks. It's like 100,000 BTU burner, and it just it goes through the propane for sure. So
I like the business because I think I told you I was a carny when I was a kid. We had we had the corn cart, 2 of them. So cotton candy, popcorn, caramel apples, candy apples, snow cones, and all that stuff. And let me tell you something. Thursdays, I'd have to go and buy the apples, and then you have to keep wiping them down as they get to room temperature because they couldn't be wet. And you get up early in the morning on a Friday or Saturday, depending on when you're going out, and make the candy apples. If you're lucky, maybe you took the trailer out the night before. If not, you got to get the trailer out, get it set up, and then you're all day until midnight. As a kid, I hated it, and we had way too many products. So when I saw your business, I'm like, it's I could see where it would be tough, but popcorn, the oil, the sugar,
you minimize the products. We also do a hand squeeze lemonade. Almost everywhere we go, and we try to sell bottles of water or Gatorade or something like that, just to offer a drink for people. And we can do different flavors, which we don't always do. We do that a lot at festivals. But to tell you the truth, our original flavor is the one everybody wants.
That's
the one that, so it's almost, it's nice to offer the variety for people that want it, but at the same time, the vast majority of people that are coming to our booth want the original flavor. So.
I really like that Center Market Festival. I was able to catch it this year. Actually, got out of work early and went down there. And what I like is because it's in Center Market and it's kind of compact.
Yeah.
Everybody is kind of together, so the crowd feels big, and all the vendors are right there.
Right.
So you're never more than a minute away. And as much as I like the waterfront and I like events there, I feel like sometimes it's spread out. And if you have the same amount of people that maybe you had at Center Market, that it would feel like. It's not that
busy.
packed.
Sure.
It's so linear, and
it's more festive too. I feel like in Center Market than what.
Yeah.
It's just you're right. It's just the atmosphere there and how everything is kind of packed in there. But I think the other thing about that festival is that every festival in Wheeling, pretty much, with a few exceptions, are at
Center Market
or Heritage Port.
Heritage Port.
So I think just having it. I just think people like Center Market. They like to be there. They like the change of pace and a different place to be, and it's just a really fun time. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't know that they're going to have it again, actually. So, which is we'll see what happens. I'm hoping that changes, but rumors are that it's not going to happen again this year. So it's a tough thing to put on.
It's a lot of work, right? And I hate to be like an armchair quarterback, but I do feel like a lot of the events down at Heritage Port tend to feel the same. I'm like, what event am I at this week? There seems like there's one almost every weekend. Probably there isn't. But that's how it seems. So
no, there really is almost every weekend something going on in Heritage Port at Heritage Port. But
and a lot of them seem like a mirror image of the last one.
We only do. We have basically our certain few festivals that we do every year, and we've kind of stuck with that. There's a couple that we'd like to get in that we just haven't been able to for various reasons. Like, for instance, the race boat regatta we did the first year, and it was a good year for us. It rained almost the whole time, so it was kind of a down. But the problem with that one is it falls right on August's birthday almost every year. My son August, so our son, we don't want to give up his birthday for the weekend to go do the race boat. But so usually that's the conflict there. But we pick pretty much the same festivals every year, and it's. Yeah, I mean, there's some truth to what you're saying for sure. There's a lot of the same stuff. It's there's only so many bands in Wheeling that they have play down there, and there's only so many vendors that come to the Heritage Port. So you're getting the same vendors and a lot of the same music for almost everything. But yeah, it's still a good time down there. It
is, and I don't want to overly criticize because it is a nice thing that they do for give people something to do in the summer, and it'd be nice if more people participated in those. So we're also
some of them are incredibly popular down there. Actually, some of the festivals are packed down there for sure. And I love that they even put that Heritage Port there to begin with, because I don't know if you remember before.
It was nasty, yeah. It was
right,
parking garage.
Well, and there was nothing. There was nothing going on.
Yeah.
I mean, like the Wheeling fairs were always in the street, like the Italian festival was in the street. Which actually a lot of people would like it to go back to that for the same reason that we're talking about, Center Market Fest. Right. But I just think it's awesome that a city the size of Wheeling has a venue like that and has something going on every weekend, and every weekend there's people there. And we like to frequent, even when we don't work the festivals, we try to go to them. So,
and I think that they do a nice job of using the space. They have music and movies and things like that through the week and on Friday nights when they're at festivals. So I think the city does a really good job of putting festivals on. So it's not really. I think they are limited by what they can do, and so when I say it's repetitive, that's just that's just the way things are. You have that space, and the same vendors, if they want to come again, you can't really turn people down because you say, well, then it seems too much like the last one. So that's what I guess one of those things is probably more unavoidable.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the coffee's probably ready. I'm gonna pour some coffee.
Yeah.
And while you talk about you were telling me earlier about your new idea of opening a coffee shop, because there really is a need in Wheeling for the kind of coffee shop that you were talking about, and I think we even referenced that you worked at Second Cup.
Yeah.
Which I know Amanda, and she's a guest of the podcast, and how popular that place was, not taking anything away from the places that exist now, but the kind of space where you can really hang out and relax and enjoy your coffee and meet people and mingle, versus just getting a cup of coffee for the sake of coffee. The coffee shops really are more about the atmosphere and
absolutely,
and all that stuff.
Customer service and building a relationship with clients and that. Yeah, but I worked at Second Cup for a long time with Amanda and Jess. They're good friends of mine, and I think they had, no offense to any other coffee shops in Wheeling, but I think that they had by far the best coffee shop in the Valley for a long time. Before that, I worked at Sippers in St. Clairsville, which was it became the Grindhouse, and AJ ran that, and AJ did a great job there as well. And I think that was one of the better coffee shops in the Valley. And they were both what you're talking about, where they were places where you could have live music and people would hang out and the free Wi-Fi and hang out all day at the coffee shop. So it's always been a dream of mine for sure, and my wife as well. So we met because I worked at Second Cup, actually. So she's a good bit younger than me, and she used to come in all the time to buy coffee, and we immediately kind of liked each other, but I always kind of tried to play it off and ignore it because she was much younger than me and didn't think that it was a realistic possibility. And the girls continuously, especially Jess, actually continuously told me that I should probably pay attention, that she was a really cool girl, and that I should give it a chance. And I knew that, of course, but maybe even saw myself as not quite good enough for her at the time. But eventually we actually, it was the last day that the coffee shop was open there that I did actually get her number.
Really?
So she came in. She was actually, as far as I remember, she was actually my last customer of.
Wow.
She came in at the end of the day, and we were closing. And she basically had rushed over there. Her and her friends used to do some classes over at Ogilvy Institute, and when they would go there, they'd come and stop at the coffee shop when they were done. And they knew that it was like kind of this last chance to come in there and see what could happen. And she came in with her friends at the end of the day. They were my last customers. I was closing up, and I had, like I said, I always liked her. And I was always into her, but I never really pursued it because, she was so much younger than me. So after I'm closing up the shop, we're walking out, and I just went to give her a hug goodbye, thinking it would be one of those sidearm kind of, nice professional hugs, I guess, and or friendly hug, I should say. But she wrapped around me real tight and gave me a real nice hug, and I was like, okay, maybe I should get this girl's number. So we exchanged numbers that day, and then it took a while because there were some personal things going on in my life at the time that were, I was dealing with some major things, I guess. But once things settled down, gave her a call, and it was that was it. So we met in the coffee shop, and that's kind of where I built my relationship with my wife, and I've built a lot of great relationships with people, customers. Customers become friends, just because that's the nature of the business. And I just love a coffee shop, and I think it's probably
it's a really good thing for a community to have a nice coffee shop.
Yeah, absolutely.
The idea that we were talking about this earlier, that you can just show up and hang out, and unlike a bar, it's acceptable to sit at a coffee shop and read a book, or write something down, or even draw,
or even encouraged, really.
Encouraged, and just to hang out there and have a coffee, and then people show up, and I know at the St. Clairsville coffee shop, I kind of did that, and all the regulars, LD, Scott, I went to
Scott. Scott was on your podcast too, wasn't he?
He was on LD and Scott were on the very second podcast that I ever did, and
I know, like, Scott is an example of one of those people that I met at that coffee shop, and I couldn't even tell you how long ago it was, because it was, like I said, it was Sippers. It was a long time ago, over a decade ago. There was just a customer there that I still to this day would consider a friend of mine that I met as a customer then. Yeah. I actually ended up living with one of my customers. I ended up being the roommate of one of the guys that came in there all the time because he needed a roommate and I needed a place to stay. So there's like lifelong relationships built just through the customer. The customers and the baristas in the coffee shop, and that's unique. I think there's not a whole lot of businesses that I think it works like that. Small diners or like small business like that, but the coffee shop just kind of breeds
loitering.
That kind of
a good kind of loitering, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's one of the it is one of the few places where loitering is kind of why it's there to hang out, and you really build a community around a coffee shop, and the relationships they do extend beyond the coffee shop.
Absolutely.
And it's just a unique atmosphere when they're done right, and I think that again there's some really good coffee shops in Wheeling, but that atmosphere that some of the other coffee shops I've been in other cities where you can really come in and relax, and it's comfy, and
exactly.
and it's really inviting to hang out there, and a destination where when I don't have anything to do, I'm going to just go down to the coffee shop and hang out. I did that all the time in St. Clairsville. I take my Kindle and sometimes my laptop, and I know when I first decided to start doing movies, I would go up to the coffee shop on my day off, and I said, well, if I want to be serious about making movies, I should approach it like a job. So I would get up there when AJ opened, I think at 10, and stay till 5 o'clock, and I would break out my laptop and plug it in and get a coffee. And I was trying to lose weight at the time, so I'd bring my own food in, and AJ was cool about it. He'd hang out, and I'd sit there with headphones and work on writing scripts, and when I was ready to take a break or whatever, we'd hang out and talk, and different friends would come in, and then in the evening when people were getting off work, I'd put the laptop away and hang out with everybody. But AJ'd let me hang out there all day long, and I couldn't imagine getting that much work done if I was at home, because I would have been distracted. But sitting there with the big windows and watching the traffic go by, and occasionally being able to take a break to talk to people, and it was a really great atmosphere. And I don't know if I would have gotten as much done as a filmmaker if it wasn't for AJ giving me that spot there to hang out.
Yeah, it's cool. I didn't know that you were working on that stuff there at the Grindhouse.
Yeah,
cool.
I have my little spot there, and I plug in my laptop, and
that's
everything.
Awesome. Yeah, I worked there for a long time. Again, back when it was Sippers, and people were there working all day, all the time. It was a great space for that, and it was a cool space for some like a small acoustic show where you could. And I know AJ was really into having some acoustic music in there too, and he had a cool thing going for sure in St. Clairsville. I know he got busy doing other things and kind of stepped away from it, but I think he was successable there too. It seemed like
he was.
Yeah. And the same thing with Second Cup. The girls, they did an amazing. They're like my they're gonna be like my coffee shop mentors. I'm gonna have to be asking them all kind of questions. But I worked there for a long time. But Amanda has such a great business sense and an idea of how to set things up, and Jess is the same way. And they both do a great job and make excellent coffee. That was one of the biggest things about that place, is that they made sure they had the best quality beans, and all of us took a great deal of pride in making sure we offered the best product. In fact, Amanda had mentioned that where she was talking about on the podcast with you. She was talking about how much pride she takes in offering a good drink, and I remember listening to that and thinking, like, I totally relate to what she's saying right now, because it just feels so good to be able to give something. You put your heart into a little cup there and just hand it to them. It feels so good to give somebody something that you worked that hard on, and try to make it the best that you can. Something as simple as coffee too, where and not necessarily talking about the drip coffee, but we're talking about an espresso drink like a cappuccino or a mocha or a latte of some kind or something like that, just to put so much into it and be able to offer that to somebody. That's the same way we do it with the kettle corn. It's a really simple process, but we try to make it, we're not going to put anything out that's not 100% what we think is our best. So, right, we try to make it as good as we can. I don't know what it is about service in that way, but I've always just, like I said, coffee shops were my favorite job that I've ever had. I've always just loved being able to do that, and I'm a kind of a people person, so
I think you're definitely a people person.
Being able to chat with people and offer them a great product is like, I don't know, that's just where it's at for me. I've had a crazy amount of jobs, probably more than I should have, I guess. And I've been in social services for a long time, which I take a great deal of pride in also. I've always said that, no matter what someone's going to pay you, it's not going to be worth whatever time you're devoting to it. So you better make sure that the time that you're devoting to it is worthwhile. You know what I mean? So, and for whatever reason, offering somebody a great product and a place to hang out is, to me, a worthwhile cause. And I just love the idea of it. So
it is, and I think you're right. That's a very good point, that whatever you're doing for a living, it's probably not worth the time for what they're paying you, so you better love it. And I want to get back to that point, but I also want to give a little shout out to Amanda, that I know that the drinks she made at Later Gator, she would perfect them.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure she did the same thing with her coffee.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you've ever seen the movie Jiro Dreams of Sushi, I think is.
I haven't, but I've heard a lot about that.
Jiro,
actually.
I think. Yeah,
Jiro Dreams of Sushi.
Yeah, and where the guy they perfect every day, his whole life he's been perfecting what he does, and that idea that I think that's missing today with a lot of people, where I'm going to make coffee and you figure it out and you go put the beans in. That's pretty good, but to sit there and really taste it, what can I do different, and how can I make it better, and what is the exact? I know that some of her drinks that are still later gated that people go in just for the drinks.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Even her Bloody Marys, which you can get anywhere, you can't really get her Bloody Mary anywhere but there.
Yeah.
She just, every drink that she served, she perfected, and so I like to see that. Anyhow, I wanted to just kind of mention that I love that people like Amanda exist, and I know that that's how you'll be with your coffee.
Yeah, well, that's how I was. Even
yeah,
when
you learned from her, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't actually learn how to make coffee from them. I learned at Sippers, actually. There was a lady there whose name was Vicky, and I don't know if I don't know Vicky's last name. Sorry, Vicky, if you happen to catch this podcast at some point, but she worked. She was kind of the manager. I don't know if she actually had the official title of manager, but that's what she was. I mean, she managed the coffee shop for a long time, and she was a great barista too. So, and she taught me how to make a good drink for sure. But there is an art to it. It's kind of amazing how an espresso machine doesn't just do the work for you. You actually have to make sure it's good. You can get a bad cup of coffee from the same machine with a different barista, so
I've done a little research on coffee. The ways to the tannins and how they manifest and how to, if you want it bitter, if you want to avoid bitterness, and the certain temperatures and everything makes a difference. In fact, one of the videos I watched talking about the French press, they recommended, every 30 seconds pouring a little off and tasting it so that you get the exact brew time. And you have to do that for basically every different kind of coffee that you're brewing in there, and even the strength of how much ground you put in, measuring it out. And that's just for a French press.
Then it depends on the bean. So like you put a different bean in there, a different roast in there, then it's going to completely change
the roast, the grind, right?
The temperature that you want. I mean, it's pretty consistent with temperature, but there's a lot to it. There's definitely a science about it. So it's an awesome process for sure. The unfortunate part is that as I get older, caffeine hits me a little harder than it used to for some strange reason. I have a harder time with caffeine than I used to. When I worked at Second Cup, I would sit and drink, espresso drinks or coffee all day. Like it was all day long. I drank that, and it never affected me. Now it's like I'll have this cup of coffee here with you, and it'll affect me for the rest of the day probably. So I can't drink it as much as I used to, but I still love making it for sure. So.
I definitely have my morning coffee, especially when I'm not at work. I like to hang out in my kitchen and do meal prep or work on making kombucha or whatever. I like to cook a lot, and that morning coffee, when it first hits my brain, it's great. But it's a one-time thing for the day.
Right.
I really can't. Maybe in the evening, if I have something to do, I can have a second cup. I get a nice euphoric feeling. But the second cup, then I get queasy and I get nauseous and I get anxiety and just anxious. And so I really have learned that I have that one big half a French press and I'm done for the day.
Yeah.
And it's, in a way, it's great though, because it makes me savor at the moment. I'm like, this is my one cup of coffee and I'm going to enjoy it. I mean, granted, it's a big tumbler. It's half of a French press, so it's probably more like 2 cups of coffee.
It's actually the 16-ounce coffees that we used to serve at Second Cup, because these are the mugs from Second Cup Cafe.
And these are really cool mugs.
They're Mara mugs, handcrafted mugs from Mexico. That was something that they offered there at Second Cup. You could buy the mugs that you use, and we would special order them for people and things like that. So
this one's cool. It's got some seahorses on it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So I'm actually kind of hoping this was kind of an idea Jess threw out to me last night too when I was talking to her, that if we do get the brick and mortar location that we're hoping to get, I want to talk to some of the people I know here in town that do pottery and see if they won't make some mugs that I can sell in the shop the same way. So almost the same concept Second Cup had, where they had these cool handcrafted mugs, except for try to make it all local people that are selling the mugs in there. So if there's anyone out there that is doing pottery right now and would like to make some mugs and sell them in the shop, hit me up.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we can do that.
And I love the idea of the synergy of everybody working together. Yeah. And I think that's one of the big strengths. This come up on the podcast a lot of times, but the big strengths of Willing is so many people are doing cool things that if you get everybody working together, get some furniture from Brandon and Melissa in there, and get some pottery from the different people that are doing pottery in town. And
that's a great idea, by the way, Brandon and Melissa making some furniture. I hadn't even thought about that until you just said it. So that's.
And it's great. It's great that you can say and local artists on the wall. I know you have some concepts that you're working on, but anything that you can do using local people, I think it's great that really builds that sense of community.
Right.
And I more and more as I get older, I look at the ability in a small way to inspire people, and maybe that's too big of a word. Even influence might be too big of a word, but I think if you do things like work with local people and support local things, that you can build a real culture of that. And one person, if they can get one other person to see what they're doing and really build that atmosphere, that where it can really take off to where you have that mentality where everybody's thinking we all act together and work together. I'm working my new venture. I guess technically people would probably best describe it as a handyman, but really it's just James Wodarcyk at your service. And
yeah, I heard you saying the business card just says
at your service.
Yeah. I heard you saying that to Lindsay. That's a great concept. I like that,
because it's really not. It is a business, but it's not a business, and it's the idea is that really, I don't just want to fix toilets or put in doors or paint living rooms, which I will do, any of that stuff, but just fix people's problems, whatever it is,
Yeah.
So if somebody said, hey, I got to take my dog to the vet and I work today, can you do it? It's my hourly rate is not cheap because I have to make a living.
Right, yeah.
But whatever it is, we're going to detail cars and pretty much anything that anybody needs, including someone wants a. I put together a deck crew, so anybody wants to build a deck, I got the guys. We're going to be building decks this summer, hopefully lots of them. But maybe it's even that there's a project that somebody wants to do, but they need help. So, and what I'm working on is not only me, but I'm working with this great guy, Trent Connor from Willing, young guy. He's been bringing me in on jobs and teaching me, which is funny because he's definitely young enough to be my son easily, and in fact I would have had him at an older age, but he's a good guy, and this idea that we help each other out and that there's enough business to go around, I like that I've met someone like that, and there's a lot of other people that feel the same way.
Yeah. And not everybody can see. Well, no one can see what's going on here in the room. But as James was talking about the deck crew, he got excited. He leaned into the mic.
I did. I did.
I was putting that out there. So that seems like it must be something that you're pretty excited about. And
I am. Because part of it is that one of the guys that's going to be on the deck crew is my friend Michael, and we were talking at the gym. He goes to the gym with me, and we're joking around because neither of us know how to pronounce each other's last names. So, but Michael, if you're listening, because he does listen to the podcast, you know who we're talking about, and to be able to work with my buddy and be able to for both of us to work together and make some money. And what I like about it is that we're helping people out. I put a storm door on for these people, and they're like, the old storm door hasn't worked well in years, and it was kind of falling apart and didn't look good. And they're happy to have a new storm door. And are we changing people's lives by that? No, but are we helping them make their life a little better?
I mean, I think actually you are changing people's lives by that. And I worked for. I was thinking about this earlier when we were talking about perfecting what you do and making sure you offer a service to somebody, and even the small mundane things meaning so much.
Yeah.
I worked for a flooring company called Lucarelli Carpet in St. Clair.
I know Lucarelli, yeah.
So Ron Lucarelli, he unfortunately passed away. He was a mentor of mine, one of my favorite people that ever lived, to be honest with you. I don't know if he would even know that, unfortunately, but his son Chris is a good friend of mine, and I got a job there with him, and he was like the epitome of what we just talked about with that, where he would go in and he wasn't going to do anything that wasn't 100% in someone's home. And he used to talk to me all the time about how he took so much pride in being able to come into a person's home, like where they live and the space that they occupy, and being able to improve that for them and make them more comfortable in their own space. And what a great service that was to offer people. And he inspired me to feel that way back then. And I'm telling you, I learned a lot from him, and being able to watch somebody that was just a master at their craft, just laying floors. You know, everyone in the valley knew that. Anyone who's into flooring knew that Ron was like, he was the guy for sure. And there was other people that did work for Lucarelli. I mean, Sam, his brother, also was one of the brothers there that did Lucarelli Carpet. But I was always with Ron's crew, and I, Ron was the one to me that was just like, he was a perfectionist and just really mastered his craft and went a long way to make sure that people got service. And we'd end up going to someone's house to, put a linoleum floor in a bathroom, and all of a sudden Ron's going to Lowe's to buy toilets and fixing leaky sinks and doing everything and not charging for any of it, just because he was the kind of guy that would go out of his way for people. And it was. I learned a lot from that. Being part of that experience and just seeing that it's not necessarily all about just doing the work that's in front of you and moving on. To offer whatever you can to people and do the best that you can at it and try to give 100% at things. Goes a long way. It means a lot.
I think that if you have that in you to take care of people and to look out for them, it does go a long way. And I think that I'm glad to see that there are more people like that these days. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of people that they just want to make a lot of money and get in and get out. I know I had a call. Actually, when I was doing the podcast with Lindsay, I had to stop it during the podcast, and it was a lady that I'd met a couple weeks earlier, and I gave her my card. She had some work that she thought she might have for me, but she said, my parents' shower, it's not working. The physical therapist had to pour water from the sink over my mom's head to wash her off. Can you go over and look at it? And I went the next morning, and I was able to fix their problem, and I called her, and she was so happy that it was taken care of that quickly, and that her parents would be okay, and it made me feel great inside to know that I was able to help somebody. And so,
well, I've been incredibly blessed in that regard because of the I just kind of, when I graduated high school, I was just a mess of a kid and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and Belmont College was free for anyone that wanted to go to it who graduated in Belmont County, and I was like, well, free college, why not? So I started going to Belmont and Belmont Tech at the time, and I was like looking through all the majors and thinking, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know if any of these sound interesting, but I was really into art when I was young, and was an okay artist. I wasn't like amazing, but I could get by, So I was looking at graphic design, but then I saw mental health, and I'm like, that sounds interesting, actually. At least that sounds fascinating to me. I don't know anything about it or psychology or anything, but so I decided to go into the mental health field for some unknown reason. And at the time, Doc McCleskey, who was another one of those men that has had a huge impact on my life and was not just my life, but thousands of people in the Ohio Valley. He was an amazing individual, and just went out of his way to make sure people learned and got through college and went into the practice doing the best that they could. But he was kind of a mentor. He and his wife Elaine, they were big time mentors for me, and so they got me through college. I would have not gotten through college without them, actually, because they stayed on top of me and made sure I did what I needed to do. But just my associate's program. So during that time, I really took a liking to psychology and to ethics and to all of those social services, and ended up in the field from that point on. Straight out of high school to now. So up to this point, and I've obviously had, when I worked at the coffee shops, those were side jobs for me, more or less. They were second jobs. I wouldn't even call them side jobs because I was working a lot of hours, especially at Sippers. I was working a lot of hours, but I would have 2 or 3 jobs at a time most of the time, but because you don't get paid a lot when you go into
when you go to school, right?
Into mental health.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been able to work direct care with kids for a long time. That was the biggest job, the longest I guess I spent in the field. But then right now with Catholic Charities, it's just amazing to be able to. You're basically working for a company. I think about it all the time, that how blessed I am to be able to work for a company that's giving you resources to help other people. You know what I mean? So it's an incredible situation to be in, because I don't know how unique it is worldwide, but I have to imagine that around the world there's not too many opportunities where someone will pay you
to help
other people. Yeah. So it's just
it is a unique job.
I felt immensely blessed for that for the longest time, and the problem with it is that you're constantly dealing with some of the worst situations you could possibly deal with. So for, I don't know, 13 or 14 years now, I guess it's been, that I've been dealing with, some of the worst situations you could ever deal with. You get burnt out after a while. You kind of switch jobs as often as you can, just so that you can get to a new bad situation to deal with. But it's, at this point, it's kind of like I'm looking back on those coffee shop days and thinking about, man, it was a lot better just to provide a service to people and be able to deal with your own problems without everything else that's going on. Not that and again, I probably sound like I'm being selfish, I guess, there or something, but it's tough to deal with other people's problems and yours at the same time. But I'm again incredibly grateful to be able to spend my days being paid to help other people with their problems. So, and Catholic Charities, by the way, I've only worked there for about 1.5 years now. I worked for Youth Services Systems for 10 years, and both of those organizations are the types of organizations I would promote them to anybody, as far as nonprofits that go out of their way to make sure that people have what they need to thrive and to feel happy. You know what I mean? So, it's incredible to work for both of those agencies for sure, and see what they can offer and what they can do.
And I think it's okay to say that I have a job that I love and the mission that we're on I support, and also say that, but it's time to get off that merry-go-round. I know that it's unpopular because most people will talk about how they hate their job or whatever, but I like working at Willing Hospital. I like my boss. I like my coworkers. I like that people coming out of surgery come up to, after they've been in the ICU or sometimes they come straight up from the recovery room and they're in our department and we see them heal up enough to walk out the door, or at least get wheeled out the door and go home. And it's a recovery unit, which is nice. And I like the schedule. So I like, in fact, the day that eventually I transition from the hospital to James Wodarcyk at your service, I'll be very upset when I leave that place.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's okay to move on to different things. And I know doing fire and EMS, we encounter people on one of the worst moments of their lives. And it's nice to be able to help them, but it's also can be very taxing. And I know I took about a year off and recently got back into it. And so burnout in your profession and in that profession and anything we're really caring for people, it is there. And I think it's okay to say, hey, I put some time in and I was able to help people, and now you have family. And so to be able to have maybe a lifestyle and to come home at the end of the day after serving coffee and to be a little bit more relaxed and a place where August can maybe even grow up around and be included in something like that. I think that it's okay to in that regard be selfish, because you're not being selfish in a way that hurts other people.
Right. Yeah. No, I want to provide things for other people for sure. Anyway, but I mean, I don't know that it's selfish in the regard that I'm going to have more time for myself or anything, because I'm actually...
You need to be more busy.
I'm actually thinking I'm probably going to be working a lot more.
Probably working 80 hours a week.
If it works out the way that I think it is, yeah. So it's not necessarily a move for that. And obviously, I want to spend as much time with my family, especially August with the years that he's in right now. My son's 4 years old, so like this is the one time he's going to be 4, and I want to make sure... People have actually always said to me, when having a kid, you got to think about just basically to soak it up while you can, while they're young like that, because they always say the time goes by so fast. So I've been really heeding that advice as much as I possibly can, and I've been trying to like slow life down as much as I can and spend as much time with him as I possibly can and try to not rush through things. It really has worked out that way. It feels like he's been in my life for my entire life now. So at this point, it's been 4 years of, it feels like 30, you know what I mean? So, which is great. And I want to keep it that way for sure. But it's going to mean a lot more hours for sure working there. But like you said, it's a place where he can actually come hang out the whole day that I'm there, or be a part of it. And as he grows up and grows a little bit older, maybe even work the shop if he likes it, and see what he wants to do. But
and up front, it will be a lot more time because you're building towards a future, and hopefully as it gets more successful, it will give you a little bit more flexibility to work your schedule around his life. And I know right now I'm working literally 2 jobs. I think I've 36 hours at the hospital, and the last month or so, on my days off, I've been doing an equivalent amount of hours going on service calls and stuff like that. I don't want to work 2 jobs. That's never been like, I've never been the kind of person that wants to work an 80-hour work week. But I feel like, plus I'm still doing podcasts, which is amazing, and
doing movies,
and I got back involved in the fire department, which I'm so glad to be back, going on calls and going on. And there's nothing like being in the back of the fire truck with all your gear on the way to a fire. I mean, it's sad that somebody's property is burning and that people's lives might be in jeopardy, but there is an excitement to be able to help, and that you have this big challenge ahead of you. But
I don't think I could do that, James. Like I think about it all the time. I just I would have a really hard time with the bad days. You know what I mean? When you end up having somebody die in a fire or die in an automobile accident or something like that, or especially say, like, I'm sure you've probably been involved where like a young child was hurt real bad or even killed, and like things like that I don't know if I could do it, because I think I definitely applaud people who do, because it takes a special person to be able to manage that and to deal with the stresses of that and still be able to contribute, and we need those people desperately. So I mean, it's
luckily we don't encounter like the ultra tragic situations too often, but when we do, one of the good things about being in an organization like that is it's a family. So on the bad days, you have this really great support system, and on the somewhat mundane days, you have, just joking around, I know we had a call a couple nights ago in the middle of the night, and everybody showed up, and I missed the ambulance out, and so we just decided to hang back at the station, and so it's 1:30 in the morning, and there's 4 or 5 of us that showed up after the ambulance rolled out, and we're just kind of, we could have all turned around, I guess, and went back home, but we all hung out and visited for a while, and to have that sense of community. So you have a team that you rely on when things get tough while you're in the middle of it, and then when it's over with, there is that support system of the family that really helps. And gosh, when you do deal with those kind of things, the one thing is, I think a lot of people want to avoid bad situations, and which is understandable. But I think when you put yourself in a position where you do have to deal with these kind of things, it does make you stronger and makes you realize that that things could be worse because you've seen worse, and makes you have a better perspective of your life.
It's funny you say that, actually, because working in social services is exactly the same thing, only except for instead of tragedy, you're talking about people who have gone through hardship for their entire lives.
Sure.
I mean, I've worked with kids that have been, grotesquely abused by family members.
It's long-term tragedy.
Right. Yeah. It's lifelong tragedy, right? Yeah. So it's, I often think about how blessed I am to have the family that I had and how blessed I am to have the home that I have. And it's not like no one comes from a perfect household or anything like that, but mine was about as close to perfect as you could get. I mean, I had a father that was paralyzed from the waist down my whole life growing up. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had to have a tumor removed from his spine when I was about right around the time that I was born, actually. So by the time I was 3 years old, he was in a wheelchair. So I don't remember him not in a wheelchair, and so that was tough, obviously. And he was the man. I mean, he was like a warrior. He fought through all that. He actually he opened his own business with his brother. They opened an interior decorating business while he was in the wheelchair.
Wow.
And it was pretty successful, but they ended up kind of getting involved with some people that they shouldn't have maybe let into the business.
Yeah.
And I don't know the whole story behind that because I was very young when this went down. But they kind of had to walk away from that business. And so my dad, after having a problem where he ends up in a wheelchair and then battling to start his own business, and then he loses that, decides that what he's going to do is go back to college in like his 40s. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
And so he went back to school. He moved to Dayton for a couple of years, actually, to go to OIPT, which is the Ohio Institute of Photography and Technology, and graduated top of his class in a wheelchair down there by himself, and then came back home and opened his own business in Martins Ferry, where he actually he would work. I mean, I know that's why when I'm talking about like sacrificing time, I watched my dad do it. I mean, he sacrificed everything to be at his business and make sure that it. But again, I was hanging out there, and the
what was
family
his business?
There. It was called K&D Print Finishing.
Oh, okay.
So back before there was Photoshop and all of the different things that people have now, it was like you had to have a real skill at airbrushing and drawing and doing things like that to fix someone and restore someone's pictures. And my dad was a very talented artist, and he would restore people's pictures, and he had like kind of it was called pixel magic. It was like kind of what was the first versions of Photoshop. He had Photoshop actually in his business, and no one knew what it was back then. But so he could do things that people thought were magic on photographs back then. And he had a printing machine that could print like giant billboard-sized decals and posters and things like that. And he would do logo designs and things like that. But he was working about probably, I would say, at least 16 hours a day. I mean, he'd be there all day, every day in the wheelchair. So what ended up happening was he had a pressure sore from being in the wheelchair all day long and working as long as he did, and that kind of took him out of commission there because. Once you start getting into that stuff, it's lifelong. He battled it for the rest of his life, actually. So, so really working as hard as he did is kind of what ended up being his downfall, I guess. But he was a great example for me. I wish I would have taken more from him because I don't work even a quarter as hard as what he did.
I could say that, the same about my father. You know, the house that I grew up in, that my dad still lives in, he built. He only built one house, but he built that house. He pretty much built it. Everything on it. He had people come in and help him every now and then. But I remember. He paved roads for a living, so he'd be laid off every winter, and then he'd go back to work when the weather cleared up. And one year, my aunt bought a house for a rental, and they wanted to add a bathroom onto the rental. And my dad went up there, and he dug the footer, he put the block, he did the subfloor, framed the walls, plumbed it, electrical, drywall, everything. Like, how to this day, I guess I probably never asked him, but I should. How did you know to do that, or just my dad's confidence to be able to say, I can do that? Now that I'm older than he was then, I'm starting to finally get that confidence where I go, yeah, I can do that. I'll figure it out. Of course, he didn't have YouTube.
I was just about to say that. I think the advantage that people like him had was they didn't live in a world of distractions. There are so many distractions now in the world that
true.
No one has time to learn how to do useful things. They have to, and I say that jokingly, obviously, because I wish that we would all just put it down and start to learn how to do different things. My grandfather was he was a World War II vet, and he was an amazing. My mom's dad. He was an amazing individual. Where he could do. It didn't matter what it was. I could go to my grandfather. He knew how to do it.
What I
mean? And my brother was smart enough at the time. He's 6 years older than me. So. He was smart at the time to spend a lot of time with Grandpa and learn a lot from Grandpa. So he learned so many different skills and things like that from my grandfather, and then has since gone on to learn on his own. So my brother's like 10 times better at doing any kind of handyman type things or fixing things. I always rely on him whenever I have a problem. I'll call my brother and ask him. He probably gets annoyed with me. I call him and ask him, how to do something. But I never really, like with my dad being paralyzed. I mean, he worked hard, but he wasn't around the house doing handyman stuff. Yeah. I never really had anyone. I could have gone to my grandfather, but he was older at the time and he didn't do it quite as much. But I never had anyone to learn any of this from. So I've had to. Now my father-in-law is really handy actually, and I've been able to learn a lot from him actually since I've been married. But yeah, I've never had anyone to show me these things. So it's kind of like I'm not mechanically inclined. I've had to kind of learn on my own. YouTube videos is actually the way to go. So I spent a lot of time. I had a friend actually here looking at the truck, which we haven't talked about yet, but he was here looking at the truck a week ago, and he's a real good mechanic. And he was like, "Listen, Grant, just anything that you need to do, look it up on YouTube. They'll show you step by step how to do it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've done that before. I know you can definitely do it." Well, but then there's still an art to it. You still have to.
There is a certain.
You still. I mean, I can't get my hand down inside of a motor to get to certain bolts. I'm sure you can because that's something that you do a lot of. But
well, and you learn certain techniques and things like that from repetitive motion of doing it.
Right.
And similar to you, my younger brother always paid attention to my dad, and he worked on a farm when he was younger. So I learned a lot from my younger brother as I've gotten older, and I didn't have any interest in it when I was younger. And my dad, he grew up on a farm, and I think in that era, you didn't necessarily hire a contractor when you wanted to put an addition on your house. You got some neighbors together, and you just did it.
Right.
And, anything that you, when something broke down, you fixed it yourself, and he came from that generation. So probably up until the time that he built the house, he had built a bunch of other things. And I remember one winter he built dog houses and bird houses in the basement with scrap wood and sold them. Not necessarily, I don't think, to make money, but I mean, they sold as soon as he put them out in the front yard. They sold, and gardening, and he just was always really good at any of that stuff. And I think he came from that culture though, where you didn't have TV and the distraction we had, so you were out there actually in the world doing things as just a part of getting through life, and you acquire these skills and also that confidence.
Yeah, it's a shame that it's not. I mean, it's almost depressing to me that it's not like that anymore. That people aren't in the world interacting with the environment around them and learning to do things. And I worry about that with my son because I think about when I was growing up. I'm actually the first year that you can still be considered a millennial, I guess. So. So I am considered a millennial, but I'm also more Generation X. But either way, like that Generation X or millennial, neither of us really learn those skills as well. But the millennials I worry about even more than anyone, because they have YouTube now to look up anything, but they don't do it's not something that they have to do anymore. No one really learns those crafts or those trades. And this is not like a, like I said, I am first year millennial, so I'm not putting down millennials or anything, but I'm just saying that generation of people, there's so many distractions, and there's just so much going on with entertainment, with different things like that. We've done as human beings just an amazing job perfecting the art of entertainment as we talk on the podcast right now. But they've got so much up against them as far as distractions that I really, for my son's future, I really worry about where the world's going with him and what kind of man he's going to grow up to be, and how he may be completely dependent upon hundreds of other people just to make sure you can take care of the different things that you have.
So I guess the question is, are we lucky that we have YouTube as a resource, or are we unlucky that we need YouTube as a resource?
Right.
Whereas like my dad, he didn't have YouTube, but he didn't need it either.
Right, yeah.
And so, and I think technology has excelled so quickly in the last 20 years, really since the turn of the century, but geez, it's like compound curve or whatever where it just keeps increasing at a higher and higher rate, to where I think even young people are going to have a hard time in the future keeping up with everything that's happening. And so we have this real growing pains where I think society in general is having a hard time adapting to it, and we're almost like children with adult toys, and we're, as a society, and we're trying to figure out how to use them. I always think that Facebook is this great communication tool, and we put pictures of our pets and what we had for dinner last night, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but one of the greatest tools of communication humanity has ever seen, and we argue with memes about stupid stuff instead of having meaningful discussions. And I think that in the future, though, I think maybe August and his generation, they're going to, since they grew up around it, they're going to learn how to pass it off and maybe assimilate it into their life better. And I noticed a lot of people wanting to get back to more hands-on bohemian type things where they are working with their hands and they want to get away from the screen. And so I think that there will be a certain lashing back against, I don't want to watch something on a screen. I want to see it for real, and to the point where maybe they have this phone fatigue where, I know for me, but I'm of course a different generation. When I'm at home, my phone sits on the counter in the kitchen, and I will walk by it and check it pretty often, but I also don't carry it in my pocket, and every time it dings, I don't run over to it.
I'm notoriously bad at being really slow to reply to messages and texts and things like that, but I will have my phone a lot, but I'll tell you that 90% of the time, if my phone's in my hand, I'm trying to learn something on it. I'm trying to read about what's going on in the world, or I'm trying to learn something. I don't really get on Facebook a whole lot. I'm not really big on social media. I mean, I actually have 2 profiles, but one's for work and one's for my personal life, because I like to keep that separate. But
sure.
I don't spend a whole lot of time looking at Facebook, but I do spend a ton of time reading articles or things like that. And I don't really like the idea of someone always having my attention.
Yeah.
At any given time, you can message me, and I'm just expected to immediately respond to that, because I like. You like to have private time and just be alone and not have to worry about what's going on with other people. If it's an emergency or whatever, then obviously it's nice to have the phone nearby and to know that that's going on. But when I get home from work, a lot of times I'll put my phone down and just kind of forget about it for the night. And then the next day I'm like, oh yeah, I never did reply to so and so about this. They probably think I'm being a jerk or whatever. But the truth is, I'm just not into my phone.
Right, absolutely.
So
and I really and I know that this is probably conversations been had amongst a lot of other people, but you got to dinner with people, and I think when you're with other people, it's rude, I still think, to be looking at your phone all the time. And occasionally, if, I will do it. Like I sent a message earlier before we started, because it was something that I had to keep up with, and I think to a certain extent that's acceptable if I do it. If other people do it, but there is something to be said where if you're spending time with a person and they're just more interested in the person that they're chatting with online, and or people, and there's a gray area there where it can be some people are more interested in the online world than the real world, and to some people they're the same, and maybe in the future they will be considered more the same. But what I like about the podcast, and why I think that people that listen to podcasts like it is, because it is a conversation, and I mention it on here all the time, but I think that 2 people sitting down the way we are and having a conversation in person is something that's lacking in the world. And so,
I agree.
The business that you're thinking about starting, the business that I'm doing, we're interacting with human beings. We're working in the real world. You're pouring a cup of coffee. I'm installing a doorknob or whatever it is, but it's something tangible in my hands. It's not theoretical. It's
and I'm used to that, because like I said, the social work jobs that I've had in the social work field, you're interacting with people for a living. That's literally what you do, is interact with people for a living and try to make that a beneficial interaction for both parties. But I don't know what I would do if I wasn't interacting with people, to be honest with you. I'm a real face-to-face kind of person. People get annoyed with me because I don't text. I'll call you, and I'm too young for that, really, to be honest. Not that I'm young anymore, I can't say that, but I don't like to text, because I like to actually hear someone's voice. And actually, to tell you the truth, I will much sooner go face-to-face with somebody to have a conversation. If it has any weight at all or any kind of importance at all, I would much rather be there face-to-face. I feel like I'm terrible at texting. People don't get what I'm saying all the time, and there's a lot's lost in that conversation when you try to have it through text instead of through face-to-face interaction.
Lots of misunderstandings via text, and you miss so much of the nonverbal communication, intonation of the voice, and even, which I guess would be verbal. But it's very easy to misinterpret a text. A simple exclamation point or a LOL doesn't necessarily always convey to the person, and so I think I'm a person who internalizes things. So I really hate the medium of text, because what did they mean by that?
You sit and think it through, and
I think about it too much.
And even your own text, actually. Like yesterday, I had someone ask me a question, and it was a yes or no question. So I sent back a no, and I just said no, and that was it. And I'm thinking, like,
am I being an
in the text world, you can't just say no, can you? Because that's interpreted as I'm being short with you, and I can't.
Right.
So then I had to sit there and think through, like, whether or not that no was going to be.
Did I need to
interpret it a certain way?
Sorry.
When it was really just a no. You know what I mean? That's all it really was just no.
And I go back and forth, because most of the time I don't even text. It's Facebook Messenger. The thumbs up thing at the end of a conversation can be like dismissive, or it could just be like, I think we're done here.
Is it sarcastic, or is it,
I think they need, besides the thumbs up, they need something that's just like, we're done here. It's a very polite way of saying we're done here. Maybe like somebody with their hands out, like, okay, whatever. I don't know. There's got to be someone maybe should invent an emoji for like the polite way to
bow out of a conversation.
I think we've reached the conclusion for the moment here. We'll pick it up at some other time. And right now it's the thumbs up, which just is. It always kind of.
Maybe you should give two thumbs up.
Two thumbs up.
Two thumbs would
maybe like a wink and a point. Like good.
Well, they have a wink and a point. I think you can find that in there.
Maybe I need to bring that out and use that for my closer. But
I don't know. Thumbs up. No, I don't know. I think the wink and the point could be interpreted.
It could be something
a lot
else.
of different ways for sure. So it's hard to say, but
like pat on the back. I don't know what it would be that you know. That you could use as a closer for a Facebook conversation, other than maybe just say "see you later" or, you know,
right.
I'm going to bed tonight. I don't know. It really gets so weird, especially for people like us who do prefer face-to-face communication
and we are. I think. And I don't know. I've never seen data on this, but I think that we are kind of anomalies when it comes to that, because I think most people that I talk to much prefer just to have the text, be able to walk away from it, or be able to move on. I think probably a lot of people listening right now are probably thinking to themselves like, I would not want you calling me all the time and have to actually have a conversation. I also feel like, though, it's so much more efficient. Like I don't want to have a 17 text conversation with you with my thumbs when I can just in 5 seconds have a conversation. We can hash it out, hear each other, and make it happen quick. So I do feel like it's still a more efficient way of communication than what texting is. But
I know Jeff and I, Mads, we were texting back and forth about a film project, and we were just like, we were off base with each other, and we couldn't figure it out. I'm like, what? I'm sitting there thinking, what is he thinking? And he's thinking the same thing. Finally, I picked up the phone and I called him, and I do that with Jeff a lot, where we'll be texting about something. I'll just pick him up like, hey, and then we'll continue the conversation. And I think it really is important that when you get into those long conversations, to just it's ridiculous. Now, on the other hand, it is a good tool for like scheduling podcast guests.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for things like that, I think it's great. Hey, when are you available? Let me check my calendar. They get back to you in a couple days or whatever. And
then you even have a point of reference you can go look back at. I mean, I think don't get me wrong, I use texting obviously all the time, but it's an amazing tool for certain things like that. Yeah.
Using the right tool for the right job is important.
And if you're emotional in any way, shape, or form, you should probably actually talk to somebody rather than, I mean, I guess sometimes it makes more sense to send a text if you're worried you're going to say something you don't want to say, and it does give you the time
to choose your words
properly and to hash it out. I don't know that people always utilize that, but it is effective for that, sure.
Knowing when to use what technology, the proper time and place, and when to just say, this even requires a face-to-face conversation.
Right,
And I agree that if you use it all right, it's like trying to use a hammer to pound in a screw.
Right.
Get a screwdriver. But if you need to pound in a nail, the hammer's perfect. And
I keep thinking back to you talking about how we have Facebook is like one of the most amazing communication devices that's ever existed, and we use it for mundane things like posting our dinner or pets or whatever. But and then you said something about arguing with memes, and I think about like, I used to get so caught up in Facebook arguments. I would see a Facebook argument, and I would make sure I wanted to have my opinion in there. And then it occurred to me one day, this does literally nothing. It does. It is such a waste of time. There is absolutely nothing that comes out of Facebook arguments. No one changes their opinions. It doesn't, because you're not actually there to convince anybody. You're just throwing, and no one wants to hear, the other side of the argument anyway. Most of the time. I mean, I've had some arguments change my opinion for sure, but for the most part, I think it's just people like tossing anger back and forth in their own style, and it just, especially when it comes to say like political things. There's so many political fights, especially now with our current climate on Facebook and on social media, and it's like, you guys could actually, you could probably take the time that you're spending. I have a couple friends that spend
too much time
all day, posting things on Facebook, and it's like you'd probably take the time that you're spending posting all this stuff on Facebook and start like some kind of activism group, or like actually do something. Actually makes some kind of difference. Whereas you feel like, that's the trick though. It's like the great trick. You feel like you're doing something because you're throwing it out there to everyone else.
Right.
So it feels like you're making some kind of difference. But in reality, I think it does so little to actually shift people's opinions or shift the views that people have on things, or make any kind of progress on tough situations.
I agree.
So
the one value I think I have in it for me is that it does make me sit and think about what I think about something, put it into words, and that back and forth with somebody I don't think I'm changing their mind, but it does help me formulate mine. But it's such a dicky way to do it.
Yeah.
It's such an asshole way to work out your opinions. Whereas a face-to-face conversation is better, and that's why I've gotten so much. This is going to be close to 50. I'm getting close to 50 podcasts, and I learned so much about myself because as we're talking, things occur to me that hadn't before that would never have occurred if we weren't having a conversation. And it's a much more healthy way to formulate ideas and to grow than arguing with people online.
Absolutely.
And this is definitely more therapeutic and just a better way to grow.
Yeah.
And as different things in my life change, it's funny how they do come up on the podcast, and I like to think that maybe if I lived in 90, I'll go back and listen to some of these podcasts and I'll say, oh yeah, I can remember that's where I was in my life at that time, because those are the things that are relevant to me that I kind of interject into the podcast.
And maybe some of this stuff won't mean anything to you by that point at all anymore. Yeah, but I just, one of the things that I'll do all the time when you're talking about like a way for you to actually analyze your own thoughts and kind of come to your own opinions is often, and I know a lot of people do this, but I will write like this full page response to somebody's thing on Facebook and then just delete it. Just delete it, just so I can go through it and read it back to myself and be like, yeah, I feel that way, but is it going to do anything if I send this to them, or am I just going to be arguing with a friend about something that isn't going to change and isn't going to affect our relationship?
That's a great way though to get it out of your system. You wrote it,
just write it down and delete it. I mean, I love to write anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's my other dream, I think, aside from the coffee shop. And actually, I kind of feel like the coffee shop too, by the way, would help me with that end of things too. But I'm one of the few things that I know for sure I'm good at in life is writing, and I'm a talented writer. So I really want to, in some ways work on that. It was actually like one of the few things. I had a teacher, Mrs. Thompson. This is a shout out to Mrs. Thompson. She's a assistant superintendent at St. Clairsville now, and a friend of ours. She's a good friend of ours. But she was one of the few people when I was growing up, as far as teachers go and people like that actually caught that I had a talent for writing, and then paid any attention to me, because I was kind of the bad kid that was across the street smoking cigarettes instead of like going to class on time. I had a teacher actually, Mr. Miller, if he would ever listen.
Coach Miller.
I had
Coach Monty.
Yeah,
I had Monty when I was in school.
So Monty Miller, he would I'd go across the street to the Pizza Shack, because it was the Shackers back then. Anyone from St. Clairsville knows what this is all about. But so I'd go across the street for lunch. We'd have our pizza and smoke a cigarette and come back in. And I had him directly after lunch, and every single day, as soon as I walk into the classroom, hey, what'd you have for lunch, Coleman? Cigarette and a pop? Every day. What'd you have for lunch? A cigarette and a pop, man? I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I had for lunch.
It's funny,
Coach. But anyway, Mrs. Thompson was like the one person that saw or at least she was the one person that ever really showed me that she saw any kind of value in me as a person, I guess, and showed me that I had talents. And I always tell her all the time that my life would be completely different if she didn't. And she was only 1 year freshman literature class, and just the influence that she had to make me feel like that I actually could contribute something academically or in any way to the world really kind of changed everything about who I am. So I've always focused on my writing, and because of her, basically, and really kind of build on that. And hopefully I'll be writing some more scripts for independent films.
Absolutely.
I've got the script that I did write. I still need some refinement, but Jeff really liked it, and hopefully we can work on that at some point in the future. But it was actually the first time when I was a little kid, actually. When I was like a real little kid, my neighbors and I, we used to write scripts all the time and like perform live plays for our parents and stuff like that. It was something and actually we even, like kids in the neighborhood, we even built this little makeshift stage in the backyard of somebody's house, and we would write scripts or write music. Those were the two things that we would do, and then we'd perform those to people around the neighborhood or whatever. Yeah. And that was kind of like a little passion of ours back then. But I had never written a script since I'd become a better writer, I guess, as an adult, and that was actually one of my favorite projects I've ever done writing-wise, because writing a script is so... I don't want to call it easy, because it's not as if it's easy, but it's like there's the process is a little I don't know how to really explain that. It's easier to have your whole vision laid out on paper, I guess, than it is to write a full book or a full novel, I guess. But it just went really smoothly for me on that one, and I really like the story. So hopefully it's something that we can manifest into reality here in the future. But
it is great when you have a story and it just kind of feels like it's even being channeled through you, that it just flows onto the paper. And it is a unique experience. And lately my mojo for writing has been gone. I've written the last year and a half a bunch of things, but nothing that I ever have been able to turn into a script. And I think I talked about it, show of hands, Sassy Assassins. And that was the title I came up with, was at the Need or Greed premiere. So that would have been, over a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
And discussed it with several people and just have not been able to get, I have a script, but every time I read it, I go, this is not something that I want to put time into.
Well, I've only seen one script because Jeff wrote the script for Pancake, but I've only seen one script that you wrote, and it was the original script for
The Wedding Dilemma.
No, for Coleraine, I think.
For
right?
Coleraine.
Yeah,
That's right. You were the
I love that script. Like that. I thought you did a fantastic job on that. It was a really great script, and I hope that someday that actually becomes something, because I was really into that script and how it all played out. It was a really well written script for sure.
I appreciate you saying that, and it was actually a joint effort between Ryan Day, Kyle Cunningham, Eddie Berardi, and Will Wallace, and they each wrote different, like almost chapters and scenes of it, and then I tried to work it together. And at the end, the problem with writing with a team like that is that everybody had a different vision for what the final product would be. And
sometimes that's good, though. If you can somehow mesh all of your visions together into one, I think cohesive vision.
I think it was good from the standpoint that I took everything that they wrote and tried to make it into a story that I liked.
Yeah.
But I think that they all walked away from it. It wasn't what they had in mind, because at the end of the day, it really is one person putting together all the ideas and making it all how they think it should fit.
Yeah.
And so I know that the original idea was Eddie and Kyle and Will, I think, and it had strayed from what they had originally wanted. So it got real confusing there at the end, and I don't mind talking about it on a podcast now because they're friends of mine, and I think that there's almost room for 2 Coleraines now.
Right.
The one that we wrote together, and then maybe a whole new version.
The one that they had envisioned.
In the first place.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying it, because I totally forgot about that script, that it even exists, and it would be a very tough one to produce, and a couple of people have mentioned.
I was thinking that as I read it, like as a movie, that is going to be a difficult movie to film.
Police cars and
it has a budget for sure.
A budget for sure.
Yeah.
And I haven't been involved in filmmaking that much lately, just because it's such a lengthy commitment to even do a short film. Me and Jeff are working on a zombie apocalypse film with Sean Duffy that's going to take place around Wheeling and the Wheeling Public Library, Ohio County Public Library, that he's going to help us get access to and get the zombies. And then Jeff wrote a post-apocalyptic piece that's a short film that we're hoping to get into here shortly. But smaller pieces like that. But God, someday I would love to take on something like Coleraine. And I guess that brings me full circle back to why I decided to try this new venture, because it's really about the lifestyle, and it's hard to make films when you have a full-time job that you have to be there certain days, and you have scheduled vacations, and it's nothing against my job or the working world. That's just the way the world is. But I started to see that there's a different way where I can work a little bit more on my own terms.
Well, that's kind of actually, as much as I felt like I've been blessed in the social work things that I've done, that's kind of what I want too, is that I just, even though I know it's going to mean working longer hours and more often, it's going to be working for me and by my terms. You know what I mean? So if I fail, it's because I fail.
Right.
If I succeed, it's because I succeed. It's not because, not that I love working with a team of people, and,
sure.
I'll probably have to have a team of people with me
sure.
on that venture. But like I just need something where, first of all, I'm a really creative person, and I'm not saying that as like a skill of mine. It's just like an innate thing or whatever, where I just have to. I feel like I have to be creative at all times, or I'm not real happy. So just having the freedom to creatively do whatever I need to do with my own little venture is kind of what I really, really need, I think, in life. So
I'm going to say something that it'll sound crazy to a lot of people, but sometimes I'll be at work and I think I really don't need the money to be here today, right now. I live and my house is paid for, and I'm not a big consumerist, so I don't spend money like crazy. People might call me cheap. That's fine if they want to call me cheap. But when I see something I want, I buy it. But I also don't believe in wasting money. And so some days, I'll be sitting there, and because I don't have a huge amount of money going out every month, that I'll be sitting thinking, God, I could just be out riding a motorcycle right now.
Yeah.
Why am I here other than, well, that's the job and you agree to work 36 hours a week. And I mean, I get 4 days off a week, which is better than most people. And I get plenty of vacation time, which is, more weeks than the average. Yeah. And so I should be very happy with that. But on the other hand, the idea that if I want to just take the day off, or schedule in a vacation, and maybe I want to take a 3-week vacation and really travel somewhere, and maybe I want to work 60 hours for 3 weeks and then take 2 weeks off. Just that control over my life, and so it is a real lifestyle thing, and also as far as how if the one of the older women from church, one of the widows, wants me to come out and do some work for them, and I decide that I don't want to charge them what I charge everybody else because they're my friends and they need a break, that I can do that. And if someone's quite frankly an asshole, that I could say there's an asshole tax, and
I actually need a little more money to work for you.
And really just there's this at some point I hope to build a business to where I don't necessarily have to do work that I really don't want to do, or work for people that I'd rather not necessarily deal with, and hopefully so far everybody I've dealt with have been nice people, and I anticipate doing interesting stuff for great people. But there are people out there that are jerks, and to be able to say I really don't have to do this, and just being in a position where I don't have to do anything, I don't rely on anybody. Nobody can fire me as far as my career. A customer might say, you're fired, or I don't want to work with you, and that's one thing. But my income and my lifestyle, I answer to myself at the end of the day.
Right.
And I like that idea. So you give up the security of, you show up 3 days a week and you get a steady paycheck and all that stuff. There's a lot of comfort in that, but I guess I'm at a point in my life where I'm willing to give up that comfort to have the ability to control my destiny.
Yeah, that's exactly what I look for. Out of what I'd like to do. But and the coffee shop idea actually sparked from really the kettle corn business, because we love the kettle corn business so much, and we've met so many people that have food trucks that I just have become like enthralled with the idea of a food truck. I mentioned, I know but for anyone that's listening, I mentioned the truck earlier. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. We have a truck sitting right outside of this podcast here. The hope is to convert into a food truck, and the coffee shop actually just kind of somehow seemed, and this might sound, counterintuitive, I guess, but coffee shop I'm saying seemed a little more feasible and doable than what the truck itself did, actually. And I listened to Thomas, the podcast you had with Thomas, where he talked about the ins and outs around the truck, and that's the same business that we have basically with the kettle corn, except for he's doing it full time, and
In fact, Thomas, I think right now is out east looking at a Snap-on tool truck that they're going to convert.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, he's doing great. But anyhow, yeah,
he needs and I heard him talking about this. He definitely, having a truck would be a huge benefit to him, because parking that trailer, I've seen him have the issues what he was talking about on your podcast, where it's hard for him to. You have to get there as early as you possibly can to get a good spot, and you can't just pull it up to the curb and start selling.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the downsides with the truck are, if the truck breaks down, then the business is broke down. My friend Dino, I don't know if you know Dino.
I know Dino. Yeah, he's from Barton, where I'm.
Yeah, he's got a great truck, and I mean he does an amazing job. He does a really good job with his truck and has great food. But he's talked to me before about like the truck. Hopefully, he doesn't mind me saying this, but the truck would break down. And he's supposed to be at a special event. And he had to have it towed to a special.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
Like that. So it's like, you get into those problems all of a sudden. Whereas if you had the trailer, you just find something else to pull it over there.
Yeah, you could rent a truck. Yeah.
Rent a truck or borrow a friend's truck or whatever to get it there. But I think for Thomas, it would be a big plus for him. And if his truck broke down, he's got a trailer to fall back on as well. So
that's true. Yeah.
Those two guys are. Those two guys do such a good job with that business. And,
they do.
And they're both, I consider both of them friends. Yeah. Hopefully they would say the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure both of them would say that they at least consider me friendly acquaintances, but they run such a good business, too. And we love being set up next to them at festivals and events and things like that. So, I see a lot of room for growth in the food truck industry in Wheeling, for sure. I think there could be a couple more trucks for sure right off the bat, and it would do nothing but help the other trucks. Especially if they all worked together and made sure that you had, ideas to maybe not be at the same place in the same day, or to everybody be at the same place for the same day, or things like that. But
And I know one thing I've learned from Thomas and from talking to you about the truck that you have out there is how expensive they are to put together and how much work it really is. It theoretically, you get a truck, you outfit it, you park somewhere, you start selling food, but it really is a tough business. You have to love it.
Yeah.
And
I do, by the way. I mean, doing those festivals, I didn't really talk about it when we were talking about the kettle corn business, but that is one of the funnest. I've had tons of jobs. Being at those festivals and just cranking out that kettle, especially when you're busy, like what I was talking about. And my brother, even, who doesn't do, he's a manual labor kind of guy, but he loves working the kettle corn business with us because it's just something about the work that you're doing there and just seeing the smile you're putting on people's faces and being around everyone that's having a good time. It can be just a great experience.
It is kind of a high energy.
We've been doing it for a long time now. Actually, I didn't really realize, but the business actually, I want to say it was 2012, I think, when we purchased the machine and started the business.
Oh, wow.
And it's done nothing but grow. When it first started, it was like, actually, I had a Trailblazer at the time, and the entire business fit in the back half of the Trailblazer. And now we have a trailer, 8x5 trailer that we don't have enough room for all the business on, plus the back of the SUV. So it's grown a lot since then. But we put pretty much almost everything we make back into the business and just keep growing it that way. It pays for a couple things for us here and there, things like that. But we try to put a lot back into it to make sure we're upgrading and making it nicer. But it is such a fun experience. Especially, I'm a huge live music guy, as you know, and to go to a festival and be able to, like, your job is to do some work while there's live music going on down the hill or whatever. It's a really fun experience. So it is a good time.
And there's something about that pace where you're very busy, and at the end of the day, you're making popcorn. So it's not nobody's going to die or anything, but at the same time, so you have that kind of need, especially if you have maybe your brother and a bunch of people where you're working together as a team and you get that whole experience, and the stakes are not as high as maybe some other things. And I think that's kind of a nice in-between thing where you can have that energy, plus interacting with people and being at a festival. And it is kind of a neat thing all the way around.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you, though, there are days, like those busy festivals like that, the next day, I'm worthless. It's like you're in pain, your shoulders hurt, you've been standing for, I mean, sometimes, like, literally 18 hours straight, because you get up in the morning and start packing the trailer and get everything together and making sure things are good. Then you go get to the festival as early as you possibly can, and sometimes you have to park 4 blocks down the street and carry 50-pound bags of popcorn all the way up the street. So it's a lot. And
if it's a multi-day festival, you got to come back and do it the next morning.
Yeah, and then there's closing up shop at the end of the night too. And when it's multi-day festivals, you got to make sure you secure everything down and take things home. You don't want somebody to steal, and especially if there's no security, it becomes a whole other issue. So it's a
Sunday
lot
nights
of work.
you're packing
everything.
And
I mean, literally, you're talking about, like, sometimes you get started maybe at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you get finished at midnight. You know what I mean? So it's like it's as long a work day as you could ever ask for, and you're the only person doing it. So if you can't do it, it just doesn't happen.
When I was a kid in the heyday of the Italian festival, we had both of our wagons there, both of our corn carts there. So one up at one end, one at the other, and my dad and my mom would work one, and me and my brothers would work the other one. And literally, you would get there, you'd get up when it was dark, and you would go home well after midnight, and then you have to go back and do it the next day. And I remember going to camp the Monday after the Italian festival, and I'm laying in my bunk and I'm making snow cones in my sleep. Like, you're just and especially those days, not only were they long days, but you were busy the whole time.
Right.
It's kind of funny because I remember now just taking money out of just like the little makeshift cash register and shoving it into a paper bag and cramming it in the cabinet underneath because the cash register was so full. Now, of course, you're paying for supplies and everything, but not so much to brag about how much money we made, but just about how busy it was.
Right.
And you couldn't keep up with everything. And but there was a certain excitement about it. But it's hard work, and at the end of the day,
definitely is. Yeah, and that New Martinsville festival I told you about actually last year, that was I think it was a 3-day. I want to say it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and we actually I hired a friend of mine. Friday, he said it's not gonna be real busy, so we came down on Friday by ourselves. It wasn't super busy, but we made some money. Saturday, he was like, I think Saturday is gonna be our huge day. They had a couple bands that were like big draws from regional draw kind of bands, and I hired my friend to come down with me, and we had to stay there. We had to camp, so we had to actually rent a campsite instead. We had the RV out there that we're turning into a food truck at some point in time was our home for the weekend. But so we drove down there. We're staying, and Saturday ended up not being very busy either. And I'm like, well, man, I can't afford to keep you around and pay you because I'm actually going to be losing money. So if you want to go home, and he had things he wanted to do anyway, so he drove home, and we're in New Martinsville, so driving home means he drove an hour plus to get home or whatever. And then Sunday was actually the day they had fireworks. It was just me and my wife, and I sent everybody else home at that point. So we had 3 people: my brother, my sister-in-law, and my friend, who were all down there to help us out, and we sent them all. We sent them all home, so because it was so slow for the whole time. So they were having fireworks that night, and actually, I was like, the way they had that set up, and they're going to change that this year. It was a great festival, by the way. I don't want to make it sound like it was too slow, but it was like it wasn't busy enough that I needed a whole crew of people with me. But the way they had it set up, I was like, hey, listen, can on Sunday, could you mind if we just move our setup and just move it down the street? Because the stage and the music was so far away that you had to walk like 3 or 4 blocks to get to the food.
Yeah.
And the beer was actually, like, we were in between the beer and the music, so I thought it was going to be an okay spot, but it turned out people they just weren't walking down that way.
Yeah.
So I asked him, and then he let us move. So we moved right down in front of the music. And then Sunday, it was pretty busy most of the day, but then when it was right before the fireworks, man, I had... There must have been 50 to 100 people in line for like 4 or 5 hours.
Oh my God!
Nonstop, and it was just me and my wife Devin. So we're both just cranking this stuff out, and it got to the point. This is what it kind of reminded me of when you were talking about that. It got to the point where I actually stopped for a second, pulled some kid aside, and said, "Hey, I'll teach you how to do this and pay you $20 if you just stand here and do it for 15 minutes. Just to give me a 15-minute break. That's all I need. Just to give your muscles. I mean, because you're moving your muscles real hard and cracking. So it's like I just need my muscles some time to reset and to get some water in me and restock some of the stuff we have going on. I paid a kid $20 for 15 minutes.
That's funny.
Just out of the crowd, and he didn't know what he was doing, so it didn't really work out real well. But he helped. He tried. We gave him his $20 and moved on. But I mean that's just the business. You never know what you're going to expect or what's going to happen.
There's something to be said too for putting in a long, hard day like that. That even though you're tired, it's good to lay in bed at night tired and know that you even yesterday I had 9 hours of I was building a shed, and then I put in a screen door and did a couple other little projects, and it was cold and rainy, and I came home and the bones ached and everything. But man, you sit down, you eat a little food, and you're like,
it's what you're designed for.
That is,
that's what humans are built for, is to do things like that, physical work all day long.
Yeah,
I love it for sure.
Yeah,
even like working in a cafe where you're on your feet all day and just wiping things down and doing things nonstop. It's different than. Now, fortunately, the job that I have now, I'm in front of a computer a lot of the day, but I'm not all day. It's not like an office job where I'm all day. It's actually because it's the neighborhood center. The main thing that happens there is we're feeding a lot of people, and I talked to you before about maybe having Beth, our regional director, come on the podcast.
Oh, yeah,
I'd come on with her and we could talk about Catholic Charities, but because it's definitely a worthwhile thing to talk about. But the neighborhood center, there's a lot of physical. You're unloading trucks and you're picking up vans and picking up fools of food and moving food around and helping people carry things from pantries, and so there is a lot of physical to it. Not nearly as much as what I would say, like say the kettle corn business or like what you're doing as a handyman, but there's at least some physical element to it, and that really breaks me out of that. I can't just sit at a desk all day. Like I just can't. I can't just sit. I'm just not built for it. Like I cannot. I feel terrible at the end of the day. I've told people so many times that I could have that day of kettle corn, like making kettle corn from 7 o'clock in the morning until midnight, and I'll be tired, and it won't be half as tired as what I'd be for like a 7-hour day of sitting in front of a computer all day. Sure. Like I just want to pass out as soon as I walk in the door.
Luckily, the job that I have at the hospital, they have a little counter space with a computer on it, so you can stand up and work.
Yeah.
And that is what I use most every day, all day for 12 hours. If I sit down, usually when I'm talking to people, sometimes I will go a whole day, sometimes a whole week, and never log on to my desk computer.
Yeah, it's great.
And it is. It's nice to be able to move around. At the same time, being in basically a nurse's station, and I do get to leave there, and I do often, and I have windows to look out, but there's something about, it's 4 o'clock, most of my primary work's been done for the day, and I have to be there till 7, and I have really 3 hours where there's nothing going on, yet you still have to be there. That, for my personality type, I guess, I almost feel like I'm caged in, and that part just kind of it doesn't work well with me, especially as I get older, which oddly enough you would think I'd be like, you're getting paid to just hang out and wait for the clock to run down, that'd be great. But what I like about what I do now is when you get there, you just start working, and when you're done working, you go home, and there's really no downtime unless you want to take a break, which usually if I'm working on something, I don't like to take a break, and I like that maybe in a 12-hour day at the hospital, I'll do 6 hours worth of actual work and then 6 hours of waiting for the work to come in. Where with what I'm doing now, you're literally working the whole day. The first day that I worked on that, building the shed, which I was assembling it, it took over the course of 3 or 4 days because I'd hit stopping points. But the first day it was like 9 hours of unpacking this thing and putting little pieces together to make big pieces. It was like a big erector set, and I loved it. 9 hours went by quick, but other than running out 15 minutes to grab some food, I was working the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
Continuously active. Look at the directions, go put the bolts together, and I really loved that. That it was a full day, and I felt like I got more out of my life that day in 9 hours than I would waiting around. And I like my job. During the downtime, you get to have some nice conversations with your coworkers.
Right. Yeah.
And it's warm and dry and cool in the summer, and so there's a lot of upsides to it. But there's something about that satisfaction at the end of the day. When I finally finished up the last bits of that shed, and it's kind of silly because it's just a shed. I looked at it and like, wow, that thing was in a box about the size of I don't even know, a couple microwaves. Just a tiny little box really, and my buddy had to come and help me with a couple parts there for a few minutes where they were a 2-man job, but otherwise, I'm like, man, I erected that thing myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. There was no like big pieces of siding or anything that had to go on?
It had pretty much, the box was the size of one of the biggest pieces of siding, which would have been, it's the sides aren't that tall, so maybe 5 foot by 4 foot.
Yeah. And
the whole box was maybe a half a foot thick.
Yeah, it's cool.
And it was all just but it's much longer. So the rails.
It's like a tin shed.
It's a tin shed. Yeah. So like all the railings, the long pieces would come in 3 sections. Each section required 4 tiny little bolts with little nuts that you had to thread through and then tighten. And so it was just a very labor intensive project. And it was like a big erector set. And I think that thing was designed to be inexpensive to produce and ship, not easy to build. It wasn't something that was meant to be.
Well, that's how a lot of products are now, for sure. Yeah.
So
we bought I forget what they're exactly called. It's a bed for August, but it's like a forgive me, I forget the word, but it's like the space underneath is empty, so it's not a bunk bed, but it's got like the raised bed.
Sure.
So almost like a dorm bed, I guess, or I know there's a word for this that I'm not thinking of right now, but and it was the same way. It was a tiny little box, and it just came like all the pieces. You had to put it together, and like you said, what they think about is how's it going to fit on a shelf? How are they going to be able to ship it? They don't think about like how difficult is this going to be to assemble. We got this thing from IKEA, so like IKEA is like notorious for like the products you take home and have to put together.
Right.
But they end up being great products also. So we're pretty happy with the bed, but it was a challenge to put it together.
And you save the money on the assembly and
right. Yeah.
And they are fun, even though they, I looked at that big bag of bolts and I said, oh, this is a lot. But then you just start working on it.
Start doing it.
Yeah.
Narrowing it down.
Little by little, it starts to come together. And like, this is starting to look like a shed. No.
Well, I have a 4-year-old, so there's a pile of that kind of thing at Christmas time. For spring. You got to assemble things and take things apart, and sometimes it's hard enough just to find out where the batteries go.
So anything else that we've missed?
I don't know. We've talked about all kind of things here.
We did.
It's been a variety.
I think we were like, oh, we don't know what we're going to talk about. I said, I think we'll figure it out, and we did pretty good. It was a good conversation, man. I enjoyed talking.
Yeah,
to you.
Me too. Thanks.
And we always have fun hanging out. I think I came over to look at your camper once, and I was here for 2 hours just
talking. Yeah, I can do that to people. I'm sorry.
No, it's good.
It works out well for a podcast, I guess.
It does, and
hopefully, at least something I said at some point throughout the course of this time was interesting to at least someone. So
I believe a lot of people will have enjoyed what you had to say. Yeah,
good.
Yeah, you got a good head on your shoulders, interesting take on the world, and it was fun.
It was. I agree.
All right, man. Hey, everybody, thanks again for listening to the podcast. And I should mention that we are actually recording this in future podcast studio number 2. Brandon and Melissa are giving me a space at their warehouse down in North Wheeling.
North Wheeling,
yep. And it's going to be cool, brick and wood and nice big space. But Grant has also allowed me to use, what would you call this place?
We call it the sun porch, but it's not really a porch. It's
like a little cabin behind his house.
Yeah, it's almost all windows, so it's
windows and skylights and hardwood everywhere. And he's got this big, beautiful table and comfy chairs. And he's graciously offered to let me use this as the Western podcast studio, and I love it. I mean, if I could recreate this kind of atmosphere in the warehouse, which is. This is really inspiring me of some different things to do, and it's just a really cool space. So
it's really just a bigger version of that shed you were just talking about building.
It really is a bigger, nicer version of the shed.
Made of wood, yeah.
It just got a nice little ceiling fan, and the cool thing about it is it's in Blaine, Ohio, which is where my mom grew up. It's 100 yards away from my grandparents' house where my mom grew up, and the little bowling alley that's been defunct since as long as I can remember, but I think my parents went on their first date there.
Wow, that's cool.
And and I ran around this whole neighborhood when I was a kid, and so it's kind of cool for me to be here. Plus, it's close to my house.
Cool little community down here for sure.
It is.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
We've enjoyed living here for sure.
So thanks for opening up the space now and in the future, and for coming on the podcast. And everybody listening, thanks again for tuning in. And until the next time, see ya.
Cause you need to get back in the arms of a good friend. And I need to get back in the arms of a girlfriend. I didn't know nobody, and then I saw you coming my way. I didn't know nobody, and then I saw you coming my way. Don't you need to